Okay, so if chat's working, still feel free to go ahead and put in what is your favorite winter activity. But it looks like we've got a good number of people here, so we could get going, I think. So my name is Judy Jaramel, and I'm here with Libby Rafferty. And today we're going to talk to you about WebGrants data reporting for the Learning Aligned Employment Program. And before going on, I just want to direct you to the bottom of this slide. Our website is www.csac.ca.gov/LAEP, LAEP, and there's many resources there, and we will also be posting a recording of this session later. And then also our email, LAEP, LAEP @csac.ca.gov. And feel free to email us at any time with questions about either WebGrant data reporting or really anything about the LAEP program. So thanks again for joining us today. Just a quick bit of housekeeping. If you could put into your display name the name of your institution, that would be really helpful to us. And today we're going to talk about LAEP WebGrant functionality, a little bit about WebGrants access. Then we'll do a detailed screen-by-screen overview of the pages. And then we'll have time probably for a Q&A. But feel free to put in any questions during the presentation in the chat, or just take yourself off mute and we can answer them directly. So coming soon, hopefully phase 1 within the next couple of weeks, we're going to have 2 pages available. The first one is the student employment data. There you'll be able to enter the demographics about your student, the LAEP criteria and eligibility, and you'll also be able to enter employer data and hopefully at some point enter wages earned and LAEP funds used. And the second page is a way to just track your ACA data, so you'll be able to just input your expenses as you use the money. And now I'm going to hand it to Libby to talk about WebGrants access.
All right, so if you are someone, it looks like we have a lot of good representation from a lot of institutions across the state today. So really excited to see the great attendance at this webinar. And I do apologize, I have a little bit of a cold, so sorry if it's difficult to understand. I'll try to speak as clearly as possible. So if you already work with WebGrants, you're probably working in the financial aid office. And so even if you don't currently have WebGrants access, you will have access available to everybody who needs it for this program. So if you already use WebGrants, great. If not, don't worry. We will be able to add you to WebGrants for this. So if you already have WebGrants access and you are a system administrator, which means you're kind of like at a higher level of access for WebGrants, you're going to automatically have access to the Learning Aligned Employment Program screens. We're hoping to have those available really within the next few weeks. So by the end of December is our goal. So those should be available really soon. And system administrators will be able to see them automatically once those become available. If you are a WebGrants user, meaning you have access to WebGrants through your system administrator on your campus, the system administrator will have to add those screens in order for you to see them when you log into WebGrants. So those people who already have WebGrants, you wouldn't need to add anything new. You would just be adding that access to your current WebGrants account. Okay. And we'll be logging into WebGrants in just a minute. If you don't have WebGrants now, you would need to log into your, you would need to get access from your campus's system administrator. And so if you're not sure who that system administrator is, you could always contact us and we can let you know, or you could contact your financial aid office on your campus and they would also be able to help you get access to WebGrants. And most likely for people who are in a career center or outside of the financial aid office, you would just get access that's limited to just those screens. So you wouldn't be able to see other types of grants. One quick note before we move on, None of these screens are available yet. So if you look in WebGrants, you won't see these yet. So I just wanted to make that clear. You can't get access to them yet. Again, we're hoping to have those released within the next few weeks. And so you shouldn't request access to them now because they don't exist yet. So once those are out, we'll be sending out a message to the listserv, and you'll be able to request access at that time. So any questions on WebGrants access or how you're going to access WebGrants? I'll pause here, and I think everyone should have the ability to take themselves off mute if you need to.
Hi, Libby. When did you say the screens would be available?
So we're hoping within the next few weeks, because so they've been, Judy and I have been working with our IT department to create them. Then we've been going through a testing procedure to make sure that the code works, and that just passed. And so right now we're just in a final testing stage. And so as soon as we can get that final testing done, it usually takes about 2 or 3 weeks. So hopefully there's no issues. We can get those done in the next 2 or 3 weeks and have that by the middle of December. We really wanted to get those screens out for you by the end of the term so that people would be able to log the students who have participated this term. So our goal is by the end of December, but it really depends on if there's any major bugs with the new code. Great question. But we'll definitely send out some kind of an email letting everybody know when these are available. Right, any other questions? All right, let's jump in. So we added some screenshots to our PowerPoint so that you'll have them when we send this PowerPoint out to everyone. It's a little bit hard to see, so we're actually just I'm going to show you just sort of a mock-up of what those screens look like in WebGrants. So your WebGrants might look a little bit different. It depends on whatever kind of access that people have in WebGrants. Today, we're just talking about the Learning Aligned Employment Program menu. So there's these 2 screens, as Judy mentioned. So let's take a look at student employment data is where you'll enter information about the student, and then the manage ACA data where you would enter information about the ACA. So let's look at the student employment data first. So when you log in, you're going to see this page where you can enter in some information about the school and what year you want to enter. So I always use Allen Hancock as an example. Anybody from Allen Hancock College in this webinar today?
That's me.
Nice. All right, Alyssa. I like using yours because you guys have the best, well, not the best, the easiest OPE ID, I think, of any institution. And you're also the beginning of the alphabet. So, all right. So I entered in Allen Hancock's school ID. Of course, if you already have WebGrants access, this might be auto-populated for you. And if you're not sure of your school's OPE ID, again, you can either reach out to your financial aid office or you can just contact us and we can let you know. We always use an 8-digit OPE ID. Oh, I don't want to say always. We usually use an 8-digit OPE ID in WebGrants. And then the academic year is this current year. We're not putting in a specific student, but if you did, you would get results for just that student. So you could see here, Judy and I put in a couple of test students earlier, so you could see what it looks like after you've entered in the student information. You'll see the student's social, their first and last name, the date that it was last edited, and then this would be your username. So let's go ahead and add a student as if we're adding a new record. Well, actually, I'll pause here. Are there any questions so far?
Is it possible to edit if, say, you made a typo on the SSN or something like that?
Yeah, good question. So let's go to, I like Test Testerson. Let's look at Test Testerson's. record. So when we open it, here's the information that was entered previously. So maybe if we made a mistake, we could change the social, so we can edit that. And I think the thing that you would likely be editing as well is the amount of money that the student earned. So we'll take a look. Let's just look at all of this screen first. So anything with a red asterisk anywhere in WebGrants, that means it's a required field. Anything that doesn't have the red asterisk means that you don't need to enter it. So these are just optional fields. You don't need to enter any of this data. In the future, what we're hoping is that when you enter the SSN, these will auto-populate based on the information that the student submitted with their financial aid application. However, at this time, it doesn't do that. It's all manual. So that's on our wish list. And so you can see this is the student's first and last name, their date of birth, and then everything else is optional. You can put it in if you would like, or you could just leave it blank. Hopefully, again, in the future, we're hoping that we would be giving you that information, so you don't need to enter this data. Any questions on student details before we move on to the next section of the screen? All right, so here's the LAEP program details. The student's college. The student is not a STEM student in this case, but if they were, we click yes, then the STEM major window appears. So we could select which kind of STEM major the student is. The student in this case is a first-generation college student. If we click no, this form will not allow us to submit because at least one underrepresented category has to be selected as yes in order to continue. So this does validate the data. So if I try to submit, it'll say you can't submit it because at least one underrepresented descriptor must be marked yes to continue. So the form is pretty smart. It'll check some of the data and validate it for you. So, you could say, oh yeah, the student is a first-generation college student. And so only one of these needs to be selected as yes in order for you to continue. Of course, if you do have information that this student is first generation and low income, that's great if you want to select more than one as well, because all of that data helps us to understand how to better serve students in the future of this program. And so, for example, if we're noticing that we have a large population of certain groups of students, or maybe that certain students aren't getting access to this program, that's something that we want to know. So you only have to select one, but we would encourage you to select as many as you have information for, just so that we can capture that data for students participating in the program. Okay, so at least one of these needs to be selected as yes. Academic credit could be yes or no. There's no requirement to offer academic credit, but you do have to answer the question. So there's no option to just say unknown. You have to select yes or no. Okay, anything I left out or any questions about this section before we move on? All right, and no one asked yet, but oh, someone did ask. Carolyn, I was just about to say, will there be an import feature? So great question. We're hoping to create an upload function, so a file that you'd be able to upload and then just put all of this data in for multiple students at once. Right now we don't have one, but that's one of the upcoming screens that we're going to try to implement, probably more closer to like summer of 2023. Good question. So for right now, it's manual, but we're hoping that this year, since it's a smaller number of students, that shouldn't create too much of an issue for schools to just be able to enter it manually, but we're hoping to have the upload function coming soon. Okay, and Lupe, these are just great segues, so good question. The report download is the other screen that we're gonna try to work on. So just like with other programs, you should be able to download a report of all of this data for all of your students, including all the payments that were made to students. So report download and file upload are 2 of 3 screens, and the last one is the interest earned. So those are 3 screens that we're hoping to have by summer of 2023. These are great questions. If a student doesn't have an SSN, we will use the CSAC ID. Is that correct? Yeah, that's a really good point. This should have an option to toggle between SSN and CSAC ID. It doesn't have that right now. And actually, Judy, can you remind me about that later? Because I forgot to check on that. Because you're right, in most screens in WebGrants, thank you. It does have the option to toggle between SSN or a CSAC ID. But on this screen, it only has the DREAM Act or SSN. One really quick note about a DREAM Act ID that I like to make in these presentations is that the DREAM Act ID and the SSN go in the same place in WebGrants. CSAC ID would have to have a different drop-down menu. It's a different number. And DACA socials, we don't use in WebGrants. So we never use the DACA SSN. So a student who applies using the California DREAM Act application will be assigned a DREAM Act ID, which is also known as a pseudo SSN. And it goes in the same place as the social security number in WebGrants. Questions on that?
Libby, I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I processed the Golden State Teacher Grant, and in the beginning it provided the institution ID for each student. Is that a possibility here? I really loved it because when the social or there was information that was not matching, it was useful to us to search for the student using the institution ID. I know it's not provided anymore, but I loved it when I was using it.
Oh, okay. So a Golden State Teacher used to have it, but it doesn't anymore?
It doesn't anymore.
Huh. I think I remember them talking about that. Okay, so you would like an option to search by social, by CSAC ID, and by the internal institutional ID?
Yes.
So you would put that in when the student, like when you're putting in the student data so that it would allow you to search for that student later?
Correct.
Got it. Okay. That's a great suggestion. We'll see what we could do. I think we have quite a long list now of some enhancements that we're hoping to have later. So this is great because this is something we could be able to add later. Thank you. All right. Any other suggestions or questions on these screens so far? These are really great. This is great feedback. And one question in the Q&A, this is just in a test environment right now. So we're hoping to have these pages available in the next, we were kind of hoping to have them available for today's webinar, but unfortunately there were a couple of bugs. So we're hoping to have these out in the next, I want to say like 3 weeks is the earliest. And then like by the end of December is like my best guess. It depends on how many bugs we find.
Libby, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
For the academic credit status, since this is for the academic year, not like per semester or quarter, are we supposed to go back in if, like, let's say the first semester they didn't receive credit and then the second one they did? Are we supposed to go in and update that to a yes?
Yes. So it would be academic credit at any point during that academic year. That's a great question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And so I think we have that in, we'll have to add that to the user guide for this. Thank you. That's a great question. So yeah, it's at any point during the year. All right, let's take a look at the employment details. So lastly, you're going to put in the student's employment details, and you could see that you can add more than one job. So it's as many jobs as a student works during the academic year. So in this case, the student worked for a campus employer. And so when you select campus employer, the research mentor pops up. So you could see when you first open up a new employer window, it depends on what type of employer you select. So campus employer will populate with a research mentor, which is required. You have to name the research mentor. Type of research also opens up, but it's an optional field, so it doesn't have to be filled in. And then employer partner is also an optional field. And that would be, for example, let's say that the student is working at the Allen Hancock campus, but maybe there's a partnership with like a nearby, I don't know, government entity where students are working with mentors outside of the campus on a project, then you would put that employer partner here. So I think a good example is like, let's say the students are working at NASA outside of the campus on some kind of a project, then you would put that employer partner here. So it means that the students working for the campus is the employer, but maybe you worked with an employer partner, and we want to capture that data just so that we can see, like, even though students were working on campus, they also partnered with these outside external partners. All right, and then you'll put in the student's gross wage and the LAEP funds expended here. So maybe the student earned $1,000 on campus. Since it's an on-campus position, they could have up to $1,000 of LAEP funds expended on the student. So the wages could be the same. I think that I don't think in this example, it will validate whether this number is higher, but in the future, once this is live, if you were to put in something that's higher here than the gross wage, it will error out. So it won't let you put in a higher amount. Okay. And then for other types of employers, if you select anything other than a campus employer, so let's say public school, then it will not have the same field. So research is no longer required because it's not a campus employer, right? And so the employer name, it will have all of the previous entries that you've had. So maybe a lot of students have worked at Apple and you've typed Apple in before. It will automatically suggest Apple so that you could just select it. So I don't know if this is a public school, so that doesn't really make sense. So we'll say other, and then you could put in the school name. All right. So employer industry, I think since it's a school, it's going to be educational services. But, these are a set list of industries. And I always forget where we got it from, but it's a set list of industries that are widely used. And so in order to be able to aggregate the data, we've kind of restricted it to a drop-down menu so that you can't, accidentally misspell services and have it be a different piece of data, because we want to capture what percentage of students are working in what industries. Okay. And then we'll put in the wages. So if the student earns $1,000 in at a public school, what's the maximum LAEP funds that could be expended on this student? Anyone?
900.
Yeah. Great. So it could be less, but it can't be more than 900. And again, once this is live, if you were to put in 1,000 here, it won't let you proceed, because as a public school, the student's only eligible for 90%. Not the student. The LAEP funds can only cover up to 90%. So the other 10% would have to be coming from the public school or some other source. Excuse me. All right, gold star. Any questions on this this section?
I can't see more.
Hi, Libby, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I have a question, Libby. If it's an off-campus employer,
Mhm.
and it's particular to the for-profit organization,
Mhm.
they may be paying their the lead student bi-monthly,
Mhm.
bi-weekly,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, bi-weekly. So, and then some months might fall into a 3 paycheck,
Mhm.
and some months will, in a year, I think in the past when I was working in a private institution, in a year, there's 2 months that they get 3 paychecks. Because there's 5 weeks or something like that. It adds up that way. But when we put this on a monthly basis, sometime it won't balance it out though, right? I'm thinking that there might be a situation where the total wages might not be what's reported
Mhm.
because there's
Yeah.
a paycheck off.
Right. So this gross wage is for the whole year. So you don't have to log every paycheck that the student gets. So if the student, I'm just using 1,000 because the math is easy, but let's say that the student earned $100 a week over 10 weeks, then you would just put in 1,000 here at the end of the year. So it might be that you're entering in the amount when the student, maybe every month you would go in and update this, or you could just come in at the end of the term and put in the total amount that the student earned. But this is going to be the total gross wages. That's a really good question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
For a moment, I thought this was a monthly reporting. Oh, okay. So we
Yeah.
have an option.
So yeah, it's kind of up to you. And we were kind of like wondering about that too, like what the best way to enter it would be. Like, so I think it's kind of up to you if you want to, come in at the beginning of the term and put the students in. Oh my gosh. Okay. If you want to come in and put I can't stand this Rubiks Cube thing. Sorry. So if you want to come in and put the students in at the beginning and then go into the view and maybe like later on you are going to update the amount. Like maybe the student got another paycheck. And so you would come in and, enter
Got it.
in
Got it.
the amounts. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
And then update. Thank you. Yeah, great question. So once it's saved successfully, this new WebGrants kind of has these like windows that open. So you'd have to like close out of this window and go back to this main page. And then if you wanted to add another student, you would go here, enter in the student's data. And then, you could select what type of employer it is, and then you could submit. One issue kind of with this screen that I should bring up, that's sort of a bug with this screen, is that if you're zoomed in over 100%, sometimes you can't see the submit button. So that's something that we're trying to fix right now. You would need to take the zoom down to 100%, and then you'll be able to see the submit button. So I just have it up pretty high because I want you to be able to see. But just a note about that for the screen is if you can't see the submit button, try taking the zoom down, or you could just call us and we'll remind you. Hopefully that's going to be fixed, but it might be a while. Right. Any other questions about the student details page, submitting the student details? Okay. Let's talk about the Administrative Cost Allowance. So pro tip, did you know that in new WebGrants, you can go to the navigation menu? You don't always have to go back to the home page. You can go to the navigation menu and go jump from page to page. You could go directly to the ACA page. But if I didn't know that, you could also go back to the home page, go to the LAEP menu, and go to manage ACA data. So again, ACA is the Administrative Cost Allowance. So do you remember try to make this interactive. Do you remember what percentage of your institution's funding can be spent on the administrative costs of the program? All right, A+. So 5%. So up to 5% of the total funding that your institution received can be spent on administrative costs. So this is the screen that you would use in order to log what you're spending that money on. And I will say that we tried really hard here to push for keeping it as limited as possible in the reporting. So we know you'll keep your own records of what you're spending the funding on. So just a reminder, you do need to keep your records for at least 3 years after the money is expended. And if you're joining now, just FYI, these pages are not available yet. We're hoping to have these available in the next few weeks. So these pages are not available in WebGrants yet, but they will be soon. So we're kind of giving you a preview of these, and apologies for not having them available yet. Wow, looks like we've got quite a few people who just joined. That's awesome. Okay, just making sure everybody can talk. All right, I think we're good. So administrative costs, up to 5%, you will need to keep your own records. So in this example, let's say that, again, we're using Allen Hancock College as our example. They used some of their administrative cost allowance to spend on marketing and outreach. So maybe they printed some brochures, or I don't know, what do kids do these days? They're using TikTok they hired a TikTok consultant to do outreach for their students. And so that was $500. You would want to keep a receipt or, the invoice that was paid for that marketing. You're going to keep that in your own records. And you need to keep that for at least 3 years past the time that was paid. So per your agreement for the Learning Aligned Employment Program, you need to keep those as per your records. So if you were audited, you need to show that receipt for $500 on marketing and outreach for the TikTok consultant. In WebGrants, it's pretty basic. We left it really, really basic. So we don't want to waste your time. All you have to do is enter in the amount and what you spent it on and submit it. That's it. So let's say that they have a new cost. They're going to go to add ACA. Maybe here's that TikTok consultant. And maybe that was, I don't know, how much does the TikTok consultant cost? We'll just say $200. However much that costs, you just need to put that in. And also one cool thing about these screens is, unlike Cal Grant, you can put in like any amounts here. So it includes cents. So this is one of the screen. That was one kind of challenge with this program is Cal Grant, there's no cents, but for this program, you can put in cents. So you could put in the exact amount that was paid, and then you'll just hit submit. And one other example that I wanted to show just before I forget, and then I'll take some questions. If you add ACA, maybe you're saying, okay, what I want is not on this list. Then you can select other, and then you can add on your own descriptions. So you can put in the exact description if you don't find it. The reason that we wanted the kind of like a drop-down list is because these were the major ones that we could anticipate. And again, we want to capture what schools are spending a lot of money on. So you can submit that. Are you sure? Yes. Okay. And then you have to close this little window and it thinks about it, and then it'll add in that cost. So that's how you would do the administrative cost allowance, and it's going to total it up for you here. And I think, we talked briefly earlier about the reporting. This is also something that will show up on your reports. So once we get those reports fired up, it'll show you how much money did your institution receive? What's 5% of that? Of that 5%, how much have you spent so far? How much is left over? And you'll also be able to enter in how much interest you've earned on any funds and apply that to the balance for student wages as well. So it'll kind of be a way of keeping the accounting for the program up to date. So you'll include that. Good question in the chat. For personnel, can we include salary and benefits into one category? Yeah, you could include it as one or as separate. So I would, like, here's an example of 2 costs for marketing and outreach. Really, I could have recorded it as just $700 for marketing and outreach. So it's kind of up to you. And I would say, like, if I have a receipt for $500 and a different receipt for $200, to me, it makes sense to put it in like this so that, when you go back and if you got audited, you'd be able to show like, okay, 500 check, 200 check, and you wouldn't have to add them together and say, okay, I guess that's where I got the number 700. So you could do either one. It's up to you. Deadlines for this and data entry. That's a great question. So every year, the reconciliation deadline for LAEP is going to be September 30th. So for Cal Grant, it's like a different date every year in September. For LAEP, we're just really trying to keep it simple. So it's going to be September 30th every year. So the fiscal year ends on June 30th, and then you have basically July 1st to September 30th to kind of finish all the payments up, make sure everything's squared away and reconciled before that September 30th deadline. That's when these screens for academic year 22-23, September 30th, 2023, these screens are going to be closed. So you wouldn't be able to make any more edits to these. It would all have to be, if there's something that happens, we'll have an appeals process, but you wouldn't really be able to make any changes to this. And the goal would be to have everything reconciled before September 30th, 2023. And then the same thing for the next year and the next year. Hopefully that answers your question. And thanks for the good question, Blanca. You can use all 5% of your ACA in the first year. So we actually would expect that schools are going to be using more of the administrative cost allowance at the beginning because you're standing up the program, and then less and less as the program is kind of already built up. So you could, in theory, use the entire 5% of the your total allocation on the administrative cost of the program in the first year. There would be no penalty for that. Good question. Does the student employment data screen also show the total amount like the ACA screen? I don't think so. No, it doesn't. So when we get the reports up, that screen will show the totals. So you would put in a search for a report. So let's actually go back to that screen. Navigation menu, LAEP, student employment data. It's not going to auto enter it for me. That's why I like using Allen Hancock, because it's easy to remember. Okay, so let's say that we entered these 2 students for the 22-23 year. And I think, so let's see, how much did tester example make? So it looks like 15 and 1,000, so 2,500. And then Testerson, I'm really bad with math, so this is going to be a disaster. I apologize. Why did I make it 6,000? So what, $7,500 or no, $8,500 total. So you wouldn't be able to see that on this screen. On your report screen, you would go into the data reporting screen and you'd be able to see like a report that has, it would look kind of like this. Like, so you'd have the student social, the name, the date that it was submitted, and then it will have like all of this data. So was this student a STEM student? Yes. And it'll kind of have the yes or no flags for all of this. It'll have the total. And then at the bottom of the report, it would have, okay, all of these students added together equals this much that you spent out of the total allocation. So we don't have that built yet, but it doesn't show on the screen, but it will show on the report. So there will be a place where you can go to see that. And we're going to try to get that done by the end of the year. We really need to get that done by the end of the year so that you would have that number, so you'd be able to reconcile. All right, these are really great questions. Any other questions on this screen or the ACA screen?
I have a question. Can you hear me, Libby?
Yes.
I couldn't figure out how to word it. So for the LAEP wages, we're only reporting their earned wages under the LAEP section for the end of year reconciliation, correct?
For end of year reconciliation, you would be telling us how much did the student make total and how much of the LAEP funds were expended. But yes, like, so the total that would come out of the amount, so it would be your institution, how much money did you receive? And then also what's the total of the LAEP funds expended? On the report, I think it will still say the gross wages that the students earned, but it wouldn't come out of anything because the only thing that would be deducting from your total would be the LAEP funds expended.
Okay, but just wages. You don't want us, we don't need to report any of the fringe under the gross wage section that's not covered under LAEP.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Good question in the chat. Will the reports be updated over the weekend or real time? Suzanne, I can tell that you've used WebGrants before. If we can make them real time, we'll try, but I would just guess that it's probably going to be over the weekend. That's always my go-to answer for anything WebGrants is to check after the weekend, but we'll try to have it be real time. Hopefully with our new WebGrant system, some of our systems can get a little bit faster than they have been in the past. But great question. So to be determined. All right. Okay, and it sounds like there are yes, okay, so good question, Arvin, about the interest calculation. So I'm going to actually go back to our PowerPoint. So we talked about the student and employer data. And so again, these screenshots are in the PowerPoint so that you'll be able to see them. We'll send this to you. So you'll have kind of a screenshot of what these pages looked like. We talked about the program details, employment details, and the ACA. So you'll have screenshots of those screens on the PowerPoint. Let's talk about the timeline and the different phases, because I think that'll answer that question as well. So phase one that we're hoping to launch in December of 2022, just within the next couple weeks, we'll have those two screens that we just talked about, the student employment data screen and the manage ACA data screen. So you'll be able to input that data within the next few weeks. In phase two, we're planning to have 3 more functions. So they might be separate pages or they might be kind of built into the Cal Grant system that's already built. We don't know yet. So interest tracking will be one of the new pages. So in the interest tracking page, it's going to be a super simple website where it says how much interest for this year, and you'll just put in that number. That's the entire function of that page. And so Arvin, to answer your question, that data will then go into your report. So it'll say, here's the total allocation for your school. Here's how much you spent on students. Here's how much you spent on the ACA. Here's how much you earned on your interest. And that leaves you with this total for the next 8 years. And then each report will do that for each academic year. So we don't have it built yet, but the idea is to have that interest page input that data so that we have your interest amount for your report so that it will be added into your total. So interest can be applied to the student wages portion of your allocation. Unfortunately, interest can't go towards the administrative costs of the program. All right. The next page in phase 2 is the file upload page. So that's where we're hoping to have an Excel sheet where you could just put multiple students upload it as a CSV file, and it will just input all of that data. For if you have 100 students participating, you don't have to put it all in separately. You could just update it. So let's say you have the students' earnings go up every couple weeks and you want to update it. You could upload a file and it'll overwrite that previous data. We don't have that function yet, but that's something that we're planning to have. So file upload, and then report download would be either its own page where you could download a report. We're hoping that we'll have its own page because we're hoping to really get with the times and have it be where you can download an Excel file instead of having to download a text file and export it to Excel. So if you're using WebGrants now, you know that we don't usually have a downloadable Excel file. So no promises, but we're really hoping for that. So we hope that we'll have a separate page where you could just download a report and even have it in Excel automatically. But we don't know if it's maybe going to be in that same report download page that all the other reports are in which case it would only be available as a text file. So more info on phase 2 to come. And those reports, usually as someone mentioned, they download, they update over the weekend. Some of them some of them update in real time, but a lot of them just update in over the weekend. And so they should be at least weekly. It shouldn't be monthly, but hopefully it'll be in real time. So hopefully that answers that question. And then any other questions on these WebGrants pages? Otherwise, we could use we have about 10 minutes left. It looks like there's some other LAEP related questions too. Okay, so I'll go kind of get back to Crystal's question. As you're developing job descriptions, is there a research requirement for a LAEP position or only at a research institution? So great question. The research requirement only applies to positions where the employer is the institution itself. So if the students are working at your institution, the institution's the employer, then the student has a research requirement as a part of that job. If they're working at an off-campus employer, so a nonprofit, for-profit, or a public school, there's no research requirement there. But there is anytime that the institution is the employer of record.
Hey,
Hopefully
Libby.
Mhm.
Can you point me to where some more information is about that? I looked at the handbook and there just wasn't a lot there.
Sure, yeah. I can talk through it with you a little bit. I mean, I can give you the statute, but basically it's a statutory requirement. So it's written in the statute that way. And if you want more information on what research is, it's defined by your institution. And so we really didn't want to restrict like certain majors just through oversight. So we just kind of left it open. So research is, whatever the research mentor deems appropriate for that major. So hopefully that is helpful and not just more confusing, but I'm happy to talk to you about that more offline too. I think it's a good question, but I'll try to come up with a good answer for that question. It's pretty open-ended.
Yeah, that's okay. I was just trying to, we're working on our job descriptions and one of the supervisors asked what that meant exactly.
Yeah, that's a good question. And you just reminded me, I'll give out one pitch. If you do have a job description that you're willing to share with people, please email it to us. Our email address is there at the bottom of the screen. We've been getting a lot of requests from people to see some sample job descriptions, and we don't have any. So if you do have a job description that's working well, or a job description you don't mind sharing with the group, we can take your institution name off of it. It'd just be really helpful to share with people. So if you do have an example to share with us, that would be great.
we're kind of using our existing student employment program as a model, but
Great.
sort of a step between that and an industry level position. Is that the right approach?
Yeah, that
Okay.
sounds great. Yeah. All right. Was there another question? I think I cut somebody off.
I had a question. So Will, can
No,
you hear me?
Libby, I was just gonna, oh, go ahead. Libby, I was just gonna comment on the research part. Yeah, I think I've talked to a couple of folks from this that attended this, and in email, I've shared with them that it's, it's really, especially at the community college, there's an applied component to it. There's the basic research and then the applied action-based research. So you might want to, whoever's listening to that, you might want to go down that path, but I'm happy to respond to and share something if something comes up. I'm gonna have to take myself off and mute myself because I'm about to sneeze trying to get over a cold. So
Well, bless you. Will, sorry about that.
Oh, no problem at all. Question regarding the cost administrative cost allowance. I wonder if there's any conversation about significantly raising that 5%, because 5%, in all honesty, is a drop in the bucket. As you were just talking about some of those costs, I was laughing because any consultant work would easily eat that up in about 2 seconds in a couple of weeks.
The TikTok consultant?
Sure, any consultant, doesn't matter. So my point is this, like you got just this reporting we're going through today, you got employer management and development. Some schools will probably have some employer relationships. Great, you still have to leverage those. You still have to get a contract agreement in place. You have to develop those. Then you have to monitor that on a weekly, monthly, ongoing basis, right? Make sure everything's up to snuff.
Yeah.
Now I'll speak for our college. Sure, we're doing 1,000 things under the sun, financial aid, and this is an institutional wide lift, as is mentioned all over the place, which is the right thing. But we're tapped, and our powers of be said, yes, let's do this. Great. But honestly, for our staff to take this on and to not have additional resources, people resources, let me be clear about that, is going to make this over the 9 years very difficult to do. Especially when a lot of our schools are strapped for cash, depending if you're basic aid or not. And even if you are basic aid, still doesn't mean it's easy to do. So just wondering if there's going to be any conversation about raising it up, because it takes personnel to get this stuff off the ground, and absorbing that with the current staffing levels, I'll speak for our current district, is going to be really hard. So that
Everybody's on mute, but I think they're probably applauding you right now. I think that's a really a good point, and something that we've been hearing from a lot of institutions. So I would say one thing would be definitely record that administrative cost in the in WebGrants this year, because we can see how much schools are spending in web. So then we'll have some data to back that up. And if any institutions, we haven't been asked yet to write any kind of an annual report on this program, but I'm sure we will be in the future. So if you do have, something that you write up with your work group or your team on your campus about, here's how much we spent and here's how much we actually needed and why, that would be really helpful for us to have that concrete data that we could show and say, when we do have to present on the effectiveness of the program, we would have a rationale for saying schools need more money, and here's why, and here's some concrete examples of where schools have documented what they don't have enough money for. So I think that would be really helpful, because we definitely have, you're definitely not the only school who's given us that feedback. So I do welcome not just you, but any school that's on this call. If you do have issues that you experience with the program, like Will mentioned, where you don't have enough funding for what you actually need to do on campus, make a note of it. And at the end of the year, definitely send us that feedback, because it's one thing if I just say that schools don't have enough money for this program. It's another if I show 20 messages from institutions where it's well documented that it's not enough money and why. So I'm happy to pass that up to the people who make decisions at the commission, because I think that's definitely a legitimate concern. So thanks for sharing that. All right. Any other questions? We have like 2 minutes left. Over award procedure. We're still working on that, Blanca. I'm sorry. I know we're taking forever on that. So I should have given earlier a shout out to our amazing Learning Aligned Employment Program work group who helped us create basically all of the resources that you see on the website. They're the reason that what we have on there makes sense, and we have those resources for institutions. So big thanks to the Learning Aligned Employment Program work group, and thank you for reminding me, Blanca. We do have the over award procedure and some other things that we're checking on whether we can make updates to like the handbook, and whether we can create regulations that give further clarity to things like what to do in an over award situation. So thanks for reminding me, and we're still working on it. Sorry. All right. Oh, thanks, Blanca. Thanks, and thanks to the whole work group, and thank you all for being here. I think we're pretty much out of time, and I want to be, I know other people have meetings to go to at 3, so thanks so much for coming, and hope to talk to you again soon. And we'll stay on if you do have questions. I saw that question in the chat. So I'm going to stop recording though, and thanks everybody for coming.